Hello, welcome to this week's video from Oakley Watches, where we're going to be talking about which vintage Rolex you should buy, or more precisely, the specifications of the type of vintage Rolex that you should buy. So, I've got three watches in front of me here that I'm going to show you. They all came into stock over the last 7 days and will be on the website this week. They are all outstanding examples of what you should be buying if you're looking for a vintage Rolex. We're going to start with this, which is a 1968 Rolex 5513. So that's the submariner. It is the non-chronometer version of the submariner, and importantly, it has the meters first dial. So the writing for the depth reading on the dial initially said meters and then feet. They changed it at some crossover point around the late 1960s, early 1970s to read feet first and then meters. So a meters first dial is always more desirable than a feet first. I'm going to use this watch as the first example of what you should be looking for when buying a vintage Rolex, particularly if you're interested in it maintaining its value. If you have a look at this watch carefully, you can see that the plots, our plots, are all original. The hands are original, all three hands, and the colors match. On a Rolex like this Submariner, if the color is very different from the hands to the plots, they have probably been changed. If they luminesce, they've definitely been changed. This watch is nearly 60 years old, and the lume on the dial and hands should be completely dead. There are a few little exceptions to that maybe we'll pick up later in another video, but generally speaking, a watch of this age should not have any lume. So that's the originality of the dial and the hands, a really important thing to look for. This 1968 5513 is fully original in that department, so that's a really good example. I'm going to move on now to this, which is a 1986 Rolex 16760 GMT Master 2. This is the first of the GMT Master 2s, sometimes called the Sophia Loren or the Fat Lady. So the element of buying a vintage Rolex that I want to look at with this particular watch is rarity. Now, the Rolex 16760 was the first ever GMT Master 2. What they discovered when they built the GMT Master 2 movement is that it wouldn't fit into the case of the existing GMT Master, the 16750. So what they had to do was find a case that it would fit, and the case from the Sea Dweller did house the movement comfortably. So this is what we have. They all have Coke bezel inserts because the 16760 was the first GMT Master ever to have a Coke insert. They came on a Jubilee or an Oyster bracelet. This one's on its original Oyster. They weren't made for very long before they managed to get the GMT Master 2 movement into a normal size GMT case and made the 16710. Of the relatively few of these that were turned out by Rolex in the 1980s, a lot of them had faulty dials. Now, the dials spidered, they cracked and crazed. This has its original dial that is showing no signs of crazing, and it would have crazed by now. It's not going to craze. So the dial hasn't been replaced, and that in itself is a rarity. So that's point two, is a watch that is generally fairly rare in the first place, and then particularly if most of them have had parts changed and you can find one that hasn't had parts changed, go for that. So rarity. The third example that I want to show you today is the Rolex 16520 Daytona that we've just had into stock. This is the Zenith Daytona, so the Rolex Daytona with the Zenith El Primero movement, the first ever automatic Rolex Daytona. The third point that I'm going to raise with this is condition. This 1991 black dial Zenith Daytona is part of a full set that's just arrived. It is an early one, and condition-wise, it is stunning. The lugs are fat, the edges are sharp, the paint is really clear in the bezel. There's no degradation of the engraving on the bezel. The bracelet's got virtually no wear. The crown is very crisp and clear on the clasp. Everything is original to the watch, and it's stunning. So the third point of what you should buy when you're buying a vintage Rolex is condition. So there are some other points. It's not that straightforward, and you should always use a trusted seller whenever you're investing money into a vintage Rolex. But the 3 points we have are originality, rarity, and condition. So these 3 watches are all in stock now at Oakley Watches. They will be on the website this week. If you've got any questions, please put them in the comments below. I hope you really enjoyed that video. Please like, please subscribe. Join us for the next one. Thank you.